Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 28th of July, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Diane Rasmussen-McCaddy and Ben Rubin, both of them on live links. So welcome to you both. Now, a lot of things happening in the country, a lot of people beginning to get stressed and anxious because they know something isn't right. And they should trust their instinct because something certainly isn't right. And one of the things that UK Column has been saying to our audience for some time now is if you can't understand the policies unfolding, try viewing them through the lens that we are being attacked by our own government. And certainly that theme very much applies to today's news and reports. Now, we're going to be having a look straight away at chaos unfolding in the country, and chaos basically promoted as part of culture. We're also going to be looking at the very hot topic of immigration. After our UK Column ad break, we're going to be getting on to positive things, but still serious. We're going to be having a look at former Tory MP Andrew Bridgen, who was speaking locally in Totnes. He had some incredible things to say. And we're going to end on the positive side of culture, because a lot of people saying it's getting really difficult to absorb the terrible things that are unfolding in the UK. But we make no apologies for reporting the difficult things, because if you want to deal with what's happening, you have to understand it. You cannot fight what you don't see and you can't understand. Ben, let's bring you in straight away. Just incredible report that you have here, and people really need to understand the significance of what took place in London.
Indeed. I mean, London town, summer in the city, and things are heating up. They're getting pretty crazy. Brian just talked about the cultural attack that we're under. We talk a lot about politics and economics and culture, the three pillars of our society. And we talk a lot about the politicians, talk a lot about the business people, industry. And today we're going to look at culture, because this weekend I've been exposed to a really bizarre mix of nihilistic hedonism, pagan ritual, Christian heresy, psychological operations, Masonic symbolism, managed descent into madness, and the breakdown of our national identity so it can ultimately be reshaped into something new. This is the chaos side of the order out of chaos equation. And events were focused around the National Gallery in central London on Trafalgar Square and the celebrations of its 200th anniversary, the NG 200 event. Been going for a couple of years, and a whole program has been taking place all around the country. And this was the crescendo of that entire process. Huge, significant cultural event for the gallery, for London, for the art world, and obviously celebrating an institution that has works of art from the likes of Holbein, Van Gogh, Turner, Da Vinci, Titian, Botticelli, Van Eyck. We had to bring in this guy to curate the proceedings. This is postmodern trickster Jeremy Deller, that guy on the right with, that's Rod Stewart, isn't it?
Yes.
Like the good pals. And Deller is a bit of an enfant terrible in the modern art world. Does a lot of conceptual stuff, as I said, postmodern trickery. Not a lot of craft to it, to be honest with you. A lot of concept and a lot of very kind of strong, simplistic messaging that kind of descends into propaganda, to be honest with you. So you arrived at the square. This was happening on Saturday afternoon. Well, started at 11 a.m. through to 5. Big public event, free to attend. All about freedom to party. We want to dance, it says on the right-hand side there. You can't quite read it, but it does say a future without fear, which is a message that I very much resonate with, actually. You know, strong, simple, but I think deceptively upbeat. Also, you'll notice that all of this is delivered in this kind of traditional style. So you have these banners that are inspired by the traditional Union banners. So you'd see like the TUC marching with these, for example, and you can look back through, the 1800s and the 1900s, and you can see examples of these being produced and taken on marches. So there's very much a socialist, left-wing political dynamic to this as well. And this essentially is the art world trying to own that space. That's what they're doing here. And I'll come back to that in a moment. It's very important, actually, because it links into Fabianism and all these kind of political movements that begin to overlap very closely with the cultural world. Let's have a look at, I guess, some art. You can call this art. And interestingly, it originates in Plymouth. So this is Beryl, the inflatable woman who was carried across Plymouth Hoe by a bunch of people from a local weightlifting gym. And that was last year, I think it was. And then she ended up tethered down in one of the fountains on Trafalgar Square on the weekend. And then she went on to become part of the parade, leading out the Triumph of Art, which, if I haven't already said, that was the name of the exhibition. Yeah? And we'll come back to the parade in a minute. I've got some footage of that. And as we said, there's a lot of talk of chaos, right? It's a very chaotic event in a number of ways, not in terms of how it was run. Yeah, it was being run very, very, very tightly, well managed, but it was deliberately chaotic. The people working there, a lot of the people working there were wearing these T-shirts. You can see it says "Good Chaos," yeah, "Good Chaos," and "Do your own thing," which is venturing into "Do as thou wilt" for me. That's what this reads like. This was coming from a charity, actually. So there's a big overlap here with the charitable sector. This organisation called Good Vibes Only. Bad vibes? No thanks. It's all about good vibes. It's all about good chaos. But what does good mean? And what's chaos mean? And where's this all heading to? I'm not sure. And also, there was a lot of fun, but ultimately a lot of talk of losing your mind. Let's have a listen to this.
Hey, you! You're losing your mind. Hey, you! You're losing
So quite hedonistic, quite raucous, chaotic, fun, but also, I think, slightly sinister. Why are we being told that we're losing our minds over and over and over and over again in the middle of Trafalgar Square? And that track was repeated several times through the day. You're losing your mind. Is that what people are supposed to take away from this? I think that's what it was. And actually, I'm reminded, if you go and read about this thing called Project Artichoke, it was a precursor to the MK Ultra program. It was about mind control, ultimately. And this feels like a propaganda exercise. I think we have to understand it like a propaganda exercise. And if you're losing your mind, you are descending into chaos. I think that's what they're trying to propagate here, very clearly. I'll come back to that point. A lot of Christian heresy. I think that's what it is, to be quite honest with you. There was this tent, also on the Trafalgar Square, where you could go and see Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. You can see the sign there, again, in that kind of traditional style. And you can see an arrow pointing to the right with a serpent entwined around it. Is that progress? Are we moving forwards with that arrow? Is that what that is? And when you went in, you weren't actually allowed to take photos, but I did go through, and you will see Adam and Eve, who did appear and go on the parade. And again, you'll see that a little bit later in the video. But when I walked through, they were both in there very happily munching away on apples from the tree of life. They were greedily gobbling down apples, greedily gobbling down knowledge from the tree of life. You know, some pretty strong messaging coming through there, right? You know. this in embrace of the satanic, ultimately. This huge, important cultural event in the centre of London. Right next to that, on the fourth plinth, was this sculpture by a lady called Teresa Margolis, who is a Jewish Mexican artist. This was reported, this is a temporary sculpture. They go up for a period of, I think it's a year or 2 years. So they just kind of rotate through different pieces of artwork. But I don't think for a second that this was here coincidentally. I think this was supposed to be a focal point. So this was about, according to The Guardian, putting 726 trans lives on the fourth plinth. Right, so you can see her there. That's the sculptor, a former forensic pathologist who has a studio attached to a morgue in Mexico City, who uses fluids from corpses to make art. Apparently, this project was inspired by a Mesoamerican tradition where they would use racks to display the skulls of sacrifice victims or prisoners of war. Again, this is right in the centre of London. It's there right now, and it's right at the centre of this focal point event, cultural event, where we're being told that we're losing our minds and everything is descending into chaos. Lots of socialist politics. William Morris was next to Adam and Eve. William Morris, he's there on the left. There was another sign. I didn't get a picture of it, unfortunately. But he was a great Victorian bloke, Londoner, writer, socialist. You can see on the right-hand side there were a bunch of his pamphlets here, Monopoly or How Labour is Robbed for the Hammersmith Socialist Society. And this is slap bang in the middle of the Fabian era. Yeah, so he wasn't a member of the Fabian Society, but he did work closely with some of the founder members. So George Bernard Shaw, for example, and William Morris were very close with each other. So that ties this all back into the dominant political movement that's running the country right now. You know, and the idea that these things are disconnected from each other, I think, is incredibly naive. What are they driving towards? They're driving towards a new form, new system of global governance. They're driving a transformation of humanity. They've been very clear about that. They're engaged in a process of transhumanism. I think that the sculpture that we just talked about speaks to that very, very clearly. But they also want to completely change the technology that we use to run our society. So this was also there at the event in the northeast corner. This was the Centre for Alternative Technology. And of course, this is all tied into the climate agenda. So they talked about zero carbon Britain, throwing new ideas into the mix, trying out new things. But actually what I saw people doing was smashing up old clay with sticks. It didn't look like new technology. It looked like old technology. It felt regressive. It felt like we were being dragged back into something primitive, actually. And that was the sense I was getting from a lot of this. A lot of these kind of paganistic rituals and symbols that were coming through were felt pre-Christian, pre-Christ, anti-Christ, actually, even in a way. Now, where's this coming from? So, of course, the UN are in the mix. So that organisation, the Centre for Alternative Technology in Wales, allows group visits to the UNESCO biosphere, UNESCO Diffie biosphere in mid-Wales. So you've got UN absolutely involved in this as well. So this is a full economic, cultural, political program tied up into a huge psychological operation and propaganda exercise in the centre of London, backed by the state, the Arts Council, but also Lord Sainsbury, Len Blavatnik, philanthropic wealth, corporations like Marks and Spencer are in the background funding the National Gallery as well. And, this was quite an astonishing thing to see. And it all culminated in this parade, which we've got a short clip of now. spend all day analysing that. I mean, it didn't feel like a country that I recognised. I don't know, Brian. What do you think?
Well, the whole topic, Ben, extremely disturbing. It certainly isn't nonsense because this is calculated policy. And of course, we've got full government support through the Minister of Culture. This is public money being used for this stuff. And it's clearly an attack on people's minds. And it's also certainly an attack on Christianity. So this is something very, very dark coming out of the heart of the state. And of course, the minds they're really after are the minds of children.
Completely agree. I completely agree. I've got another video. I'm just going to skip over that, though, actually, just in the interest of time. Maybe we can show that later on. But I wanted to just give you a quick overview, right? Because then something interesting happened in the afternoon. So here we've got the view of Trafalgar Square. This is the map. So you can see, well, you can actually... been cut off slightly in the top left-hand corner, but the losing your mind bit was on the steps in the centre. The fourth plinth with the transgender sculpture in the top left, next to Adam and Eve, William Morris there, the alternative technology systems, Beryl the inflatable, the good chaos people around Nelson's column. I did wonder what Nelson would have thought of all of this while I was there, to be honest with you. And then in the afternoon, completely unexpected, certainly by me, but I don't think this was uncalculated in any way. This would certainly have been part of the entire program. Transgender Pride comes in, and it actually starts in the southwest corner of Trafalgar Square. So you've had the 3 or 4 hours of these new ideas swilling around in the square, the chaos and the madness and the do as thou wilt, and these ideas that then get subsumed into the Trans Pride parade, which kicked off. That's me just outside the Admiralty in the southwest corner. You can see the parade starting off, and it was very well attended. Once they started moving, they were going past for a good half hour, 40 minutes, something like that. There's a lot of people out on the street. Lots to be said about that. It's a very complicated issue, and Brian and I are going to talk about that more over the next week or two. But one thing that jumped out at me from this, I thought was quite sinister. You can see this is always presented in the context of empathy and kindness. And you can see on the left there, the sign says, trans lives are more important than cis feelings. And the lady holding that up is in the right-hand side of the frame. And she was wearing a T-shirt which says on it, which blow that up for you, kill everyone now, condone first-degree murder, advocate cannibalism, eat SH1T, filth is my politics, filth is my life. Now that's a quote from a film called Pink Flamingos by John Waters, came out in 1972. But that was really striking to me when I saw that online earlier on. You know, what is this all about? Because that doesn't sound like empathy and kindness to me. Also, a couple more things. Real witches don't support transphobes. So apparently real witches are pro-trans. What else are real witches doing? Who are these witches? It's not the first time I've heard talk of witchcraft in London over the past week, to be quite frank with you. Something going on here. What else is happening? This is the view down Whitehall from Trafalgar Square. 3 Ukraine flags, 2 Union Jacks. Is there a pecking order here? Are we an occupied country? Are all of these things connected? I don't know. Quick timeline cleanse. I headed back into the National Gallery to get a bit of sense. The Pistoia Santa Trinita altarpiece on the left there, Francesco Pesellino, 1435, and then Raphael's Mond Crucifixion, 1530 on the right. That's more like it.
Ben, thank you very much. Well, our audience clearly picking up how serious this is. And of course, this culture has not come out of nowhere. It hasn't just sort of manifested. This is created with the backing of enormous amounts of public money through the government itself. And many people saying, I just can't believe what the UK column is reporting today because this is Satanism. Well, many people might agree with you, but one thing we can be sure of, this culture is being implanted on the population of UK, whether we want it or not at the moment, until people stand up to be counted. And of course, this is immensely dangerous, an immensely dangerous attack on the minds of our children. So what else is going on? Well, I'll just hold up the Sunday Telegraph here, which I purchased yesterday. And what caught my eye was this headline: Police Unit to Monitor Anger Over Migrants. And this is the National Internet Intelligence Investigation Team. This is a bit like 77 Brigade, but it's the police, and they are going to go flat out to pick up anybody who dares criticise the mass migration policy. Well, we are going to do exactly that by pointing out to people that the plan is to exile the UK population in its own land, in their own land, in our own land. And who am I talking about? Well, I'm not talking about white people. I'm talking about anybody who's established in this country and who has been enjoying the established cultural identity of this country, because the agenda of the government is to destroy our cultural identity. And I remember many years ago, the chairman of Birmingham Central Mosque came and gave a talk in Plymouth where he talked about why he left a very dangerous Pakistan to come to UK. And of course, he came to UK because of the cultural environment in this country. He didn't come to UK to live in the same cultural environment as Pakistan, which was very, very dangerous to his family. So the learning process here is everybody who is living in this country is to be attacked under this policy. And the attack is also designed to destroy the lives of the migrants themselves. Now, I'm just going to very, very quickly flick through the headlines or the major articles in this Telegraph edition, because clearly the Telegraph was up to no good. Here is a very emotive picture about people daring to protest about what's happening with these massive migration and immigration figures. We've got lots of fear. If I bring you on to this one, we've got grooming gangs juxtaposed with Nigerian immigrant poets and migrant murder. So this is all absolutely designed to ramp up the fear in people's minds and to lead people to believe that they cannot do anything to stop this madness which the government has implemented. Now, if we look at the mighty Telegraph itself, they can't even manage to produce a proper analytical article about what is going on. The headline here is "Ending Secrecy on Migrant Crime Statistics Will Help Stop the Boats." Well, of course, the boats are a minor part of the migration and the immigration, and the idea is to get the public focused on rubber boats and not onto the politics that are coming through the government on immigration. And of course, the fear is continued in the Telegraph. So we've got put resources into physical policing, not Orwellian units. So the government, and this is cross-party, it's Labour and Conservative, Lib Dems have been in there in times gone past. The government itself has been creating the chaos through this ridiculous and dangerous immigration policy. The violence ensues. The criminality ensues, and then what do? You call for more police. This is building the dictatorship in UK, and it's getting very, very easy to recognise. Now, aside from the Telegraph articles and mixed opinion on immigration and migration, of course, Palestine and Israel were heavily represented, and of course the paper putting across simply the Israeli government viewpoint. And here was the headline: "Recognising Palestine would reward murder and rape." Why am I mentioning this? Because the paper mixes this stuff against its immigration reporting so that people's minds are completely scrambled as to what they really should be worried about. Here's another headline: "Town in Fear. after supporters of pro-Gaza MP accused of intimidation campaign. Be fearful, be afraid of migrants in this country. But of course, the government itself wants those migrants in this country in vast numbers to break down the cultural identity of this nation. And they're going to use the type of psychology that Ben has already shown in London. Now, I've captioned this: Palestine's slaughter swept into the long grass. You can make your own mind up about this, but essentially nothing pro-Palestine in the Telegraph, not interested in the slaughter. It's simply to keep the pro-Israel line going. Now, I'm going to say here to our audience that UK Column absolutely delighted recently to have an interview with a Jewish lady talking about her concerns, and indeed the concerns of wider Jewish communities, about what is being done in their name. And we will have further interviews from members of the Jewish community talking about that. So really pleased to see that finally we've got a dialogue going with people who are deeply, deeply unhappy with Zionist policy. Now, just before we show you a video about what people have really been saying about immigration and migration, last little headline here, if I could bring it up on screen from the Telegraph. It's about Mandelson calling Epstein his best pal in a birthday message. But of course, that was absolutely tucked away in the Telegraph itself. Apparently not important to the Telegraph, but I think very, very important to many people, not only in the UK, but also the United States. Let's look at what ordinary men and women were saying about problems to do with immigration in Epping. And a big thank you to Will Coleshill for sending us this report from the end of last week.
I've been here over 70 years.
What was it like up until the migrants arrived?
That hotel was very posh. You used to have a man years ago with a grand piano playing. We never could afford to go in there. And even my daughter had a wedding reception there, and it was lovely. And then all this lot all come in, and they just ruined it all. Everything's ruined now. And it's such a shame. It's never lovely there, isn't it?
Just support the local people. I live about 5 miles away. Come down here to show my support. I've been down here every time. I'm here peacefully, I'd like to know, unlike some the other day. But it's got to stop. It's ridiculous. People, the average British person is struggling, and yet these come over on a banana boat, get a free mobile phone, get allowance, which they've been spending in the bookies by all accounts today, we've been told. It's just enough is enough. Just everybody's had enough of it. It just seems like the government just don't give two shits about the British people. And it's just, like I just keep saying, enough is enough.
It's just a point of principle that I just think that these people come over and no one's stopping to ask questions or, if you're coming over, can you prove you can support yourself? I know Britain's always opened its arms, and in principle I'm for that. But it's just getting ridiculous. Our own people. A friend of mine who's disabled, who's been kicked out on the street, British born and bred, and can't get council flat, will have no money, and is going to have to live on the street. How right is that when other people come over and just seem to get whatever they want? So it's a point of principle rather than specifically what happened here. It's just generally. I just don't think British people are supported. I don't care what colour you are, what nationality you are, but essentially you're British. You are not supporting it.
It's not all this lot coming in, walking about. I'm frightened to take my dog out. She's only a little dog, and I'm frightened to go out with her. And it's just awful out here. It's just been out, the whole country's out of control. And Starmer just flies around on these the planes going everywhere, not doing a thing. Just other countries, that's all he thinks about.
Residents again gathered in the Essex town of Epping on Thursday in protest against the Bell Migrant Hotel, expressing concerns for local safety. A large police presence was in place with police from around 7 different forces, including Met Police, TSG and dogs. Protesters peacefully worked with the police to congregate in designated penned areas despite fears this may spark a flashpoint. Protesters sought to bring on board the local council in opposition to the hotel.
We believe that the council isn't showing any solidarity. For too long, they've put out lip service about how they want the hotel shut down. They want it closed, but the true reality is they're not. If they wanted the hotel shut down, they wanted to keep our community safe, they'd be standing here today and they'd be marching alongside us.
So do you think you're going to be able to draw councillors over to your side and put pressure?
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, or I don't know, but I believe there was 2 district councillors at our last protest on Sunday. I'd like to see plenty more.
And does the council actually have power to stop this sort of thing happening in their area?
The sad reality is that they don't. However, local protests work when elected representatives get on board and side with the local people. Protest works when they have solidarity from the voices that have been elected. The fact that the council hasn't come and stood with us today, it kind of delegitimizes our peaceful protest. We would like the council here alongside us, and it kind of gives us a firmer voice that Epping says no.
And when's the next council elections, and will you be standing if they don't listen?
I don't know if I'll be standing, probably not, to be honest. It depends on my personal situation, but I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we had our elections cancelled, and I believe the next ones are in 2026, so keep an eye out. Okay everyone, we'll be leaving now. We'll be leaving towards the council. The liaison officer's going to stop the traffic so it's safe to cross, and we'll make our way down the high road.
In defiance of the weather, protesters then marched towards the council building, drawing on significant support from the locals of the town. Protesters then congregated opposite the council building, demanding solidarity from the local councillors.
But the district council will be debating a motion as to whether they support the closure of the Bell Hotel. Residents of Epping, do you support the closure of the Bell Hotel? We're here to show that the town, the residents of Epping, we want this hotel gone. We have to clear them out, we don't want them here. The Bell Hotel has posed a risk for too long. We've had 2 arsonists, 2 counts of arson, 3 counts of sexual assault, and 2 others. And it's too much. The residents are in danger. Community's not safe. As long as that hotel's open, we can't walk our streets safe at night. As long as that hotel's open, we can't guarantee that our girls won't be harassed. Until that hotel's shut, we'll keep protesting. We'll keep peacefully protesting and raising our voices and letting it know that the hotel has to go!
The protest then wound down, with many returning to the hotel and their cars. Later Thursday evening, it was announced that Epping District Council passed a motion of solidarity against the hotel. A further protest is planned for Sunday, spurred on by Tommy Robinson, with a counter-demonstration planned. This is Will Coleshill reporting for UK Column News. Keep peeled for more.
Save our kids! 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 One more!
So local people getting fired up quite rightly, but of course nothing will change, nothing will stop unless the wider public in UK tackle the government as the source of the problems and not to focus on people on the ground. But of course, changing the views of your local council, very, very important. Diane, let's bring you in because you've also been seeing things happen around the subject of immigration. What have you got for us today?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And hello, Ben. It's great to be here today. I just have a little bit of coverage I'd like to show. There's quite several YouTubers that are covering what's happening around the country about immigration, but also things around boarded up homes in smaller towns around the country. So areas outside of London, general deprivation, a lot of things going on. In this one in particular that I'd like to show just a short clip from, which you can see the full video in the show notes later. This was filmed around a migrant hotel in Liverpool by one of these YouTubers that's just kind of walking around and seeing what's going on, just looking at the landscape. And this particular YouTuber talked to one of the migrants that was staying in this hotel. And let's just take a short look at what the migrant had to say to the YouTuber.
You around here, are you? Oh, you live up there, yeah? I was at the hotel,
This is for asylum.
Yeah, asylum, yeah. How did he treat you alright? Treat you alright in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Look after you? No problems?
No problem, but not British people.
No, just...
Yeah.
Where are you from?
Me, Arabic, Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia? Nice. What brought you to England?
Me?
What brought you here, yeah?
No.
How come you come here?
Yes.
How come?
Airport.
Yeah. No. I'm asking why. Do you want to live here?
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia is such a nice place.
I know, man. But I have some
Issues?
yes.
Yeah. Legal, signed off,
Yeah.
so you can stay, yeah.
Find job, work, something like that.
Yeah. So what's your plan?
For here?
Yeah.
Actually, man, I don't know.
So he's got legal issues. He has no plan for what's going to happen. He goes on to say as well, if you continue to watch the interview, that it's potentially a 4-star hotel, but for him, it's a 3-star, according to the person he was speaking with. I just want to remind viewers, if you want to see what's backing this, that there's a report from the United Nations called Replacement Migration is a solution to declining and aging populations, ? It was published in March of 2000, and it has projections all the way up to 2050 and perhaps beyond in some cases. And part of this is explained very well in an article that we published in 2 parts on the UK Column website earlier this year. It comes from a book by Simon Elmer about the Great Replacement, immigration in the UK. So if we can just put those up on screen. Part 1, as we can see here, is a photo of Axel Rudacabana, if you remember that incident from last year. This part talks about the statistics that is presented in the UN report. And part 2, we see there the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, when he is talking about, in this case, the policies that the government has put in place to make this replacement happen.
Diane, thank you very much for that. And it's interesting to see people producing these little film clips, which are very informative. And of course, we're never going to see it on the BBC or the mainstream media. Now, let's just do some niceties around the UK column, and a huge thank you to our audience, to our supporters. We can only do what we do with your financial support. So thank you very much to everybody who is a member and or donating or buying from our shop. If you're not doing any of those things, please join us and support our work to help us not only keep going, but to also expand. Now, Diane, we've got some articles here, I think. Are you able to give us a little bit of comment on those?
Yes, just some articles we've published in the past few days. This one is part of the relatively new and ongoing series called Syria-Centric from Vanessa Beeley. This one is called The War Against the Druze to Achieve the Zionist David's Corridor in Syria. It's actually a nice companion to the interview that you did with Lynn Lopez Salcedo last week. So that goes along well. The next one we have here is Parliament and the Assisted Dying Bill. Voices protesting the process is used. This is written by a pseudonym called Cassandra Wise. And this author does a very good job of looking at the protesting. The procedures have not been placed correctly to get the assisted dying bill to the point to where it is right now. The next article that we've published recently is called Is 5G Dangerous by Dr. Jobst Landgriebe. I will say that this article has created a fair amount of discussion around various communities. So we're happy to receive input both for and against or neutral in case of what this has been written here. So take a look at that article and please join this lively discussion that's going on right now. We might have more opinions later. And finally, I think we have one more piece, which was mentioned last week on the news, when Mariana met the Shemaranis, How Reporting Becomes Propaganda, by a veteran journalist called Bridgen, and she did a really great job of tearing apart the BBC panorama coverage, and Mariana Spring in particular, about what she did with Kate Shemarani and the death of her daughter, Paloma.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Diane. Now, tomorrow at 1:00, we've got an interview with Lynn Taylor going out. This is on the subject of international education. It will be having a look at big companies, including Lego, but big corporations getting involved with children's education. We've also got Princess Kate now very interested in under fives. And this will be pulling apart some of the strange agendas going on around the the education of our children. Tonight, Germ Warfare is an interview with Miriam Charabati, and that goes out at 7 p.m. And then we'd also like to give you a reminder that for the Freedom Music Festival, 22nd to the 25th of August, and UK Column, of course, will be there. Now, major news is that tickets for the UK Column on Location event in York are now out. And indeed, they're not only out there selling. We'd like to say a huge thank you to Mary from Cheshire, who was there on the button and bought the first ticket. But if you'd like to buy a ticket and join us, it's going to be a fantastic event. Remember, health is the theme. Then this is a little video that Kenny produced in order to show you how to do it. So click on the shop. You can then have a look at UK Column on Location in York. You can choose your ticket or ticket and an evening meal, and then obviously head for the checkout. So very, very simple and easy to do via the UK Column website. Tickets are already selling quite quickly. So I'm going to say to you, we're obviously going to continue to say to people, if you want to come and have the excitement of being there in person, you need to get into the website and get yourself tickets as soon as possible. That event on the 18th of October, of course, will be a stepping stone for the UK Column doing what you've all asked us for, which is a weekend event next year in order to celebrate 20 years of the UK Column. So this is a team effort. We've only been able to do this with the support of our wonderful viewers and supporters. Now, many people are saying to the UK Column, we can see all the terrible things. We need some good news. And in the second half of today's UK Column news, we're going to have a look at people who are fighting back. And I'm going to concentrate in this next segment on former Tory MP Andrew Bridgen, who Friday night, just gone, gave a talk about his experiences as an MP in Totnes. My goodness, it was incredible. And of course, none of his information appeared in the Sunday Telegraph or the BBC. And if we have a listen to some of these clips, you will understand why. But I am going to say this is such important material. I'm going to allow today's news to overrun slightly from our normal time, but I think the information is vital. We're going to be looking at Andrew Bridgen talking about really what is really going on in politics in UK. So let's have a look at the introduction where Andrew Bridgen was welcomed in by Patrick Henningsen.
So finally, we had a voice in Westminster. A fearless voice, a champion of truth and justice, and he's going to be sharing his story with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome Andrew Bridgen.
This evening I'm going to tell you a lot of things that have happened over the last 5 years. Many of you have experienced yourself and what it was like being in Parliament when these strange things were going on. And the proudest moment I ever had in my life was standing up in the House of Commons and speaking the unpalatable truth. In a chamber which is supposedly the mother of all parliaments, where your elected representatives are supposed to speak without fear or favour. Ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you that in the House of Commons there is a lot of fear and there is a lot of favour. I want to give you a little bit of my background. It's fair to say I didn't get into politics the normal way, and when I think the moment came to stand up and warn the people about what was going on, there were no takers.
So this is the first very important point by Andrew Bridgen, that when he realised things were wrong, he went for support amongst his colleagues. There was no support, as we will hear later. When he went to the mainstream press, there was no support, there was no reporting. But also, of course, many people don't want to hear what's happening because they're frightened of the information. But if we're going to fight what's happening, we have to stand up and be counted. And every adult, man or woman in this country, needs to know what's really happening. Now, let's listen to Andrew Bridgen talking about David Cameron and Boris Johnson and how they think is really the subject.
This is what I came to Colville in 2005 with Michael Howard on the campaign trail. He says, "What a SH1T hole." Wow. I said, "Well, that's on my postal address." I said, "I'm not some parachuted in candidate. This is where I was brought up." I said, "We will win." I said, "We just had the biggest swing in the country in the local elections, and we've destroyed the Labour Party. The councillor base has gone, and we will win. And I don't need the party's money, I've got my own money." And quite honestly, David, I said, if you feel like that about North West Leicestershire, best you never come here again. And to be honest, I mean, David Cameron can be a man of his word. Because he never came to North West Leicestershire ever again. And we didn't miss it. Boris Johnson never wanted us to leave the European Union. The establishment didn't want us to leave the European Union, which is why, despite voting to leave, we've only ever had the worst parts of Brexit.
Yeah.
It's all been scuppered by the establishment, punish us for having the temerity to vote against their wishes. They hate democracy, and I made a prediction at the time that it'll be a very long time before they ever allow the British people to have another referendum after you blooded the establishment's nose.
Well, that was pretty direct, and of course it gave us a glimpse into the deep mind of David Cameron, utter arrogance, those horrible little poor people up north. And with regard to Brexit, it was a big game. And of course, UK Column always labelled it Brexit without the exit. Now, Andrew Bridgen went on to talk about what he discovered around COVID. Let's have a listen.
At an R rate of 3, that meant for every person who caught it, they gave it to 3 others. What we knew from South Africa was that the Omicron variant was a lot milder, less lethal, but it was very contagious, had an R rate of 12. So it's 4 times more easily transmitted. And we know that whatever lockdown measures were taken, they didn't stop the spread of whatever it was. So what lockdown measures could possibly stop something with an R rate of 3 but was less than half as lethal? And why would you want to try? So in December 21, I was pretty shocked when the first week in December I got an invite to go to a party at number 10. We were going to hear more about these parties. And I already got wind in Parliament that they were going to try and lock us down December to Christmas 21 again. So I wrote back to Boris Johnson and said, thanks for the invite, but I've got wind that you're going to try and restrict the freedoms of my constituents this Christmas in a few weeks' time. I'm going to vote against it, I'll speak against it, I think it's wrong. And because of that, it's completely inappropriate, even though it's within the rules at the moment. If you go and have a lovely party at number 10 and some drinks, I think it's inappropriate if in a couple of weeks' time you're going to take the freedoms of my people away again. So I'm not coming. And the week after, I got another invite to another party the week after. And by this time it was out that they were looking to take away your freedoms again. And I said, well, you're now saying you're going to do this. And I wrote to you last week, so I'm definitely not coming. I'm happy to have a business meeting with the Prime Minister if he wanted to discuss policy, but I'm not coming to a drinks party when you're going to take away the public's freedom. And then the week after that, the third week in December, Partygate broke, didn't it? So then you realise why they'd invited all the MPs to number 10, so they wanted everybody's hands in the blood. We'd all been to parties. Yeah, I haven't.
So the truth coming out about COVID, and yes, Andrew Bridgen did get caught up initially with vaccines, but once he discovered what was going on, he's been prepared to speak out, and that has cost him not only his business life, it's cost him his personal life and his family. So tremendous courage to tour the country speaking out as an alienated MP, now former MP, warning people about the way that the UK Parliament and political system actually thinks. And of course, it is an incredibly callous viewpoint coming out of Westminster. We need more MPs to break ranks. So we would say to the audience, if you've got some doubts or you don't agree with everything that Andrew Bridgen is saying, that's your entitlement, but respect what he is doing to get the word out about what he was able to challenge and what he's been able to uncover. This is him talking about the post office scandal, which of course resulted in destroyed lives, people in prison, and indeed suicides.
For many, many months, Fujitsu claimed that Mr. Rudkin had never been on the premises. I told them that Mr. Rudkin had claimed he'd signed the visitors book on that day, and helpfully Fujitsu said that they'd lost the visitors book for the day in question. Eventually, a whistleblower came forward from Fujitsu, one of the IT engineers, and he verified everything that Michael Rudkin had said. Ron Warmington was the forensic accountant I recommended to the government to investigate with a view to administering a mediation scheme for the victims.
He saw the bigger picture, much bigger picture. There were many, many more people impacted, and he understood the consequences.
Why? Well, because the government... My part has been written out of this drama. I don't think any of us are surprised by that. But what ITV have also written out is its own refusal to tell this story when the broadcaster was first told about it by me in 2014. Its chief executive at the time was Adam Crozier, who at the height of the scandal was in charge of Royal Mail, of which the Post Office was then part. ITV doesn't mention its old boss in the drama series either. I went to the BBC, to ITV, to Sky, to Channel 4 News. I went to the Times, I went to the Telegraph, I went to the Daily Mail. I didn't actually get an article in the Sunday Express. Caroline Wheeler was the political editor of the Sunday Express at the time, and we did a small article about it, which is all we could get in, about this huge miscarriage of justice. Caroline subsequently moved to the Times, the Sunday Times, and I was expecting, we were all optimistic that now she was at a broadsheet newspaper, the newspaper of record, that we'd be able to expose this great injustice. But the fact is that Caroline Wheeler went to the Sunday Times, her ability to get that story out disappeared with her move.
Well, he says a lot there, but in the final clip, we really understand how Parliament works when a system that wants to shut him up resorts not only to pressure, but to outright bribery. Let's have a listen.
This junior civil servant, there are hundreds and hundreds. All of Downing Street is actually one big office block with two flats in there, one at number 10 and one on number 11. All the buildings are linked. Number 9, 10 and 11 Downing Street, they're all linked behind the front wall. And there are hundreds of civil servants working there and advisors. And one of them wrote an email to his line manager during the lockdowns And he said, don't you think we ought to enforce masking and social distancing in the building because we've inflicted it on the public? And the email came back from his manager, nah, because we've checked out with the scientists and none of it works. But since there are cameras always outside the front door, when you go home or go out, you make sure you put your mask on and social distance for the cameras. It was a complete con, and I was pretty angry about that. I'd seen the impact it had had on my constituents, economically, mentally, physically, and I wasn't happy about that. So I wrote, the first week in January 22, I was full page in the Telegraph saying, thanks Boris, but goodbye, time to go. And that is when they came to me to number 10, and asked, and I'd already spoken in the debate in December and voted against the NHS mandates, the masking, the social distancing, any restrictions of freedoms. And they came to me in the January 22, and it was unreal. They came to me and said, what do you want, Andrew? I said, well, what do you mean, what do I want? They said, well, you tell us what you want to shut up and we'll just get it for you. I said, well, what, anything? They said, well, pretty much. Just tell us what you want to get it for you and then you shut up. Oh. I said, is that the game we're playing, really? He said, that's the game we're playing now. I said, in that case, if that's the game we're playing, and I can have anything I want, I think I better have the Prime Minister's resignation letter, haven't I? And unfortunately, they told me that was the one thing I couldn't have. So I said, well, I don't want any, if that's the game we're playing, I don't want anything else, do I? And it was pretty much war after that. And they inflicted some very severe financial harm on me through the corruption of the judiciary, repeatedly. And all those millions I'd earned, they were separated from my businesses. I had £2 million in my private pension fund before I became ever elected in 2010. No access to any of that money, not to this day.
Well, that says it all, not only a corrupt Westminster, but corruption amongst the judiciary. And of course, many people who go through the family courts are only too aware of that as their children are stolen behind closed doors. But Speak Out and the state, the political state of UK, wants to destroy you. So this really sets the whole scene. The country is being attacked, and the policies are coming out of our own government. And clearly this needs to be dealt with before we're going to be able to clean anything up. Diane, let's bring you in. We're going to try and end today's news with a bit more uplifting, but for me to hear a former MP daring to go onto the public stage to criticise not only his colleagues, but the system and indeed the judiciary, this is something which should be uplifting, because, of course, if Andrew Bridgen can speak out, then other people can come forward from within the political arena, and surely we should be giving them maximum support to do just that. So, welcome back, and can you lift the mood further from good men speaking out?
I will try to do so, Brian. I just wanted to do a little segment here on what I consider to be beautiful culture. It's part of traditional English culture, and English music, and Renaissance music in particular, is something that I have loved for many years before I moved across the pond. And I think this was something that maybe can help us fight the darkness and the satanic messages, including what we saw in Ben's coverage earlier in the program. But I also want to emphasize that in order to save English culture and all these traditional bits of beauty that we can find, we have to get out there and partake and participate in order to save it. And if we don't do that, then it will go away. So here's something I did yesterday. This was in the village of Corbridge in Northumberland, up here in the northeast of England, and I attended an event from the Corbridge Chamber Music Festival. These are some photos that I took before the event. This was when I was walking into the village from the south side of the village, where the railway station and the car park are, crossing the River Tyne into the village of Corbridge. Just a beautiful day, even though the weather wasn't absolutely perfect. It was still a bit of scenery, and you could hear the river flowing and just see the beauty of the trees and the North Pennines in the distance, just beautiful. So as I walked through into the village, eventually I reached the parish church of St. Andrew, which is the location of the concert, which is right in the middle of the village, surrounded by lots of beautiful cafes and cobblestones and all of the sort of picturesque things that you think about when you might think about a beautiful traditional English village. And inside the church where the concert was held, I have a photo of that as well. So we see sort of the very traditional beauty that we come to expect when we visit the Church of England or any church or any sort of religious location in the traditional England. So the concert that I went to hear in particular, and I made a really strong point to hear them, this was called the Flutes and Frets Duo. And I've played the flute since I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And I started learning to play Renaissance music on the flute when I was around 15. So I was really interested to hear this. They described the concert, and these are two young musicians who I really think should be supported. They described the concert from the program as, quote, a fascinating journey through the 500-year-long history. That's a long time. Of the flute and the guitar, featuring a myriad of instruments, ancient and modern, in a selection of the Flutes and Frets duo's favorite repertoire. So one of the things that they opened with, the first piece included part of a song from 1597 called Now, Oh Now, I Needs Must Part. This is written by a composer called John Doland. He was an English Renaissance music composer who was born in 1563 and died in 1626. So I'm going to explore a little bit more about this in extra for our members, but I just want to read a few lines as a sort of a palate cleanser from some things that we heard and saw earlier in the news. So this is the first verse from the song. Now, oh now, I needs must part, parting though I absent mourn. Absence can no joy impart. Joy once fled cannot return. Where I live, I needs must love. Live lives not when hope is gone. Now at last despair doth prove. Love divided, loveth none. So that's just the first verse of that beautiful song. And this weekend, Brian, I'm going to be attending the opening weekend of the Edinburgh Festival. I'm expecting it's going to be a mix of old and new culture, so I will try to choose appropriately, and I will see what I can report from the festival on next Monday's news.
Yeah, what wonderful, Diane. And of course, a major point for you here is that if people want to keep their culture, they have to support it. And when these little events happen, often they get missed because they're not advertised properly in the mainstream media. But if you can seek them out and give people support, then that is doing something which is rejuvenating for yourself, but it's also helping keep the cultural base of this country going. What a difference between sorry, Dan, what a difference between what was taking place in that church and what we saw on the streets of London in Ben's report.
Absolutely. And what you invited me to add is that there will be a link in the show notes to support these two young artists from the Flutes and Frets duo. They have recorded their first CD back late last year, and they are asking for donations with this small record company that wants to make their CD available. So if there's any way that you could potentially think about donating to these two wonderful young people, I would highly encourage you to do so.
Okay, now you've got a couple of videos to end, which is back on the theme of local people doing local things through local councillors absolutely can make a difference.
Yes, so I just wanted to go back to some of the coverage that I included in last week's news here in Durham County, where the Durham County Council voted out the sort of the climate emergency response plan overwhelmingly. I should note that there are 68 Reform UK councillors out of 94 councillors here in the county Durham Council. And so this was really quite phenomenal. But I wanted to highlight a little bit more of the work that some of the councillors that I interviewed, and these again are UK column exclusives. So the first one I want to go back to is Councillor Ian Catchpole. I actually saw Councillor Catchpole yesterday at my local Stand in the Park group, who decided to make an appearance. And he talked to several of us who were there, and Ian and I had a really good conversation about some of the things that he is currently reading and learning and what he is trying to engage with to help him understand what exactly is going on in this country and in the world, and ultimately what we can do about it. So here's a short clip that was another part of the interview that I recorded for him last week, where he was talking about a sensible approach to looking at renewable energy sources that will truly be beneficial to the planet.
Me, like a lot, it just sounds expensive, because if you look at the plan for change, it's millions of pounds, right?
Well, offshore wind's 4 times more expensive than onshore.
Right.
Yeah. So it's very expensive.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But it's also we've already got existing wind farms. We've got Dogger Bank existing.
Right.
What we don't do, is we don't site battery storage close to the shore where the power comes in, store it. Wind energy is intermittent.
Right.
Right. So that's intermittent. Solar power is very peaky.
Especially in this country.
So both of those technologies, they require an element of storage before they go to the national grid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what people don't understand. They just think, we'll do loads of solar, we'll do loads of wind. That doesn't work that way. You need to sort the energy out before it goes into the national grid. Okay?
Yeah.
But,
that makes sense. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
So there's quite a bit to take in there, and a lot more that I think I need to learn to understand all of what he explained. But again, going on to another example from the interviews I did there last week at the council meeting. This is Councillor Darren Grimes. He is the deputy leader of Forum UK in County Durham. And this was at the end of when we discussed the scrapping of the net zero climate emergency policy. Here's what he had to say about the work that I've been doing around the library books and education.
And that actually, third, that I want to work with you as well, and this is an exclusive, on countering the indoctrination of our children.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. And I wanted to say, after that discussion we had a few days ago, I've started to look into it. I haven't had time to do as much as I want, but I have found already examples of things that are shelved in the children's section. One in particular is about 2 dads that gave birth, and it's to teach it's for ages 3 and up, saying this dad gave birth to this child.
So, not only are we not content with the fact that we have children reporting, a large amount of children reporting nightmares that the world is about to end in a ball of flames or they're going to all drown to death, but we're also telling them that actually biological reality doesn't exist.
Right.
And we're in the land of fairies and pixies, saying that 2 men can carry a child. It's absurd.
Right.
So I don't have any truck with any of that. I like facts, and I think that's what we made clear today.
Absolutely. I thought you did a great job with that. And I think as well, knowing about the indoctrination is that when they mentioned, children are worried about the climate, it's because they're being taught that in schools.
Yeah.
And not given any other options.
Which proves that your work is so important and actually crucial to tooling people like myself with the weapons that we need to make the case against this kind of push to actually politicize our kids.
Right, and that's exactly what's happening. So thank you again for that work, and we will continue to work on that issue.
We will indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time, and thank you again for your work today.
So that is some ongoing work, and I just want to finally report, just to end this, that recently in the United States, this was an email received that I got a few days ago through an advocacy group affiliated with the American Library Association, which is completely captured and in favor of putting this kind of content in front of children that Councillor Grimes and I are working together to fight. They have reported in a very negative way, but it's actually very good news, that there have been 596 books pulled from the shelves in the Defense Department of United States schools that serve the military children as part of the approach to removing this kind of information from government materials. Now, there are 596 books. We can't talk about all of them, but there will be a link to the full list, which has recently just been revealed online. An example of one book was called If You're a Drag Queen and You Know It. The author is Lil Mess Hot Mess. Let it show by winking, shaking your bum, laughing real big, twirling around and more. A perfect companion to the hips on the drag queen go swish, swish, swish. This was written by a board member of the Drag Queen Story Hour, and that summary comes from a bookshop in Manchester called Queer Lit, which is a bookshop and Pride store. So if you're in Manchester, you might want to go see what's happening down there.
Diane, thank you very much. And you've got one final image. Brace yourselves, public. One final image to finish on today.
This may or may not need a trigger warning, depending on what you think of our Prime Minister. So we don't want to hear about the ID to cross the border, as we've been covering in today's news. But now that the online safety bill is in place, we do need ID to use the internet. So make sure you have your ID in the right place and throw it out if you're planning to come in, Brian.
Brilliant. Well, Ben and Diane, thank you very much for joining me in today's UK Column News. Huge thank you to the audience, wherever you are in the world. And I know that we certainly do have a worldwide audience. So thank you for giving up your time to watch. Become a member if you're not. And we must end there. So an extended UK Column News today. Very, very, very serious things now beginning to unfold in UK. People getting agitated, some of them getting quite frightened at what they see unfolding. But if we're going to fight it, we have to know what is happening. We have to know who is driving this malicious agenda. And we have to be brave enough to stand up and be counted. So get learning, get researching, and have the courage to stand up and challenge what's happening. And if you can't understand what's happening, then start by thinking that you're being attacked by your own government. We'll end there. Thank you. Bye-bye.